I can still hear the sound of the glass shattering, that sharp, breaking note slicing through silence like a scream. My mother's voice followed 3 seconds later, trembling, accusing, desperate. I was standing there, my hands empty, heart stampeding inside my chest, trying to understand how everything went so wrong. The crystal vase lay in 100 pieces on the marble floor, the one that had been her wedding gift from my grandmother. My older sister stood at the doorway, face calm, pretending to cry, but I saw it. The slight curl of her lip, the satisfaction in her eyes. Before I could speak, she whispered, "Mom, she did it. I told her not to touch it." I froze. I hadn't even been near that table. But my mother didn't wait for explanations. She slapped me across the face, the sound louder than the crash itself, and screamed that I'd ruined the last thing she had left from her mother. That moment carved itself into me 13 years old, blamed for something I didn't do, punished for someone else's lie. I remember touching my cheek, wondering which hurt more, the sting of her hand or the sting of not being believed. For years after that, I tried to earn back something. I never actually lost her trust. I became the helper, the peacemaker, the one who stayed quiet when accused, who cleaned twice just to avoid hearing her sigh. My sister, Sana, was the golden child. 2 years older, prettier, always dressed in ironed clothes and soft smiles. Everyone adored her, the teachers, the neighbors, even my grandmother before she died. I used to believe she was perfect too, until I started noticing the small cruelties. How she'd borrow my clothes and deny it. How she'd whisper things to my mother when I wasn't around and watch me take the blame for them later. I told myself she'd grow out of it, that maybe jealousy was just part of sisterhood. But deep down, I knew better. I lived in the shadow of her manipulations, apologizing for things that weren't mine to apologize for. When I turned 15, I took up tutoring neighborhood kids to earn small money. I saved every rupee, hoping to one day buy my mother something beautiful. Something that might make her look at me like she used to before the vase, before the mistrust. 2 years later, a new betrayal came, sharper than any before. My father's business started failing. The tension in the house grew like humidity before a storm. Bills piled up. Everyone was on edge. And somehow, the blame always found its way to me. My mother said I was selfish for not studying enough to secure our future. My sister said I was lazy because I worked instead of focusing on school. I became the lightning rod for their frustration, the one who absorbed their anger to keep the peace. Until one evening, everything snapped again. Money had gone. Missing from my father's drawer are us $42,000. It wasn't much to outsiders, but for us, it was a lot. My mother found the drawer empty, and immediately, everyone looked at me. I denied it, again and again. My voice cracked, my eyes stung, but no one listened. My father yelled that he'd raised a thief. My mother cried. Sana stood quietly in the corner, trembling like an actress in a perfect role. I'll never forget the look she gave me. A mix of triumph and pity. That night ended with me locked in my room, sobbing into a pillow, knowing someone else had stolen that. Money and I had no way to prove my innocence. I didn't leave my room for 2 days. Then, by chance, karma whispered. While cleaning, I found a crumpled shopping bag inside Sana's closet tucked behind her shoes. Inside was a new smartwatch and perfume, exactly what she'd been bragging about wanting. I checked the receipt. Rs. 41,950. Bought the day after the money vanished. I stared at it for a long time, heart racing, torn between rage and heartbreak. My first instinct was to run downstairs and throw it in her face, but something stopped me. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was that tiny flicker of intelligence that told me revenge wasted too soon has no teeth. So I folded the receipt, took photos, and began saving every single piece of proof I could find. That was when my strategy began, quiet, slow, methodical. I started observing her like a scientist observing her subject. How she hid her phone when Mom entered the room. How she'd lie so smoothly, so easily, without even blinking. I noticed how she always manipulated small situations to make herself the victim. I began documenting everything, screenshots of her, messages to her friends bragging about fooling everyone again, photos of her late night outings she covered with fake study excuses, Even a video of her sneaking into Dad's office one evening when she thought everyone was asleep. I saved it all. It took 6 months of patience. 6 months of playing dumb while gathering ammunition. During that time, she grew overconfident, careless, and that's always how villains ruin themselves. My moment came unexpectedly. My mother's birthday approached, and Sana volunteered to decorate the house. She used my saved money, yes, mine, to buy a designer dress for herself, claiming it was for an event. But she didn't know I had transferred my tutoring savings to a different account under a friend's name, just to see if she'd notice. She did, and she panicked. That's when I realized she'd been quietly using my ATM card for months, so I let her dig deeper. I pretended not to notice withdrawals. I kept quiet, even smiled when Mom praised her for being so responsible. And then came the reveal. It was a Sunday afternoon. My father was in the living room, Mom was baking, and relatives had come over for tea. Sana was wearing a white dress, hair curled, laughing loudly as if she owned every sound in the room. That's when I played the video on the television silently. A recording of her last night, sneaking into Dad's drawer, counting cash, whispering into her phone. He won't even notice, it's just cash lying there. The room froze. My father's cup slipped from his hand and shattered. My mother's face went white. Sana turned slowly, her voice shaking. "What is this?" I stepped forward calmly. My voice didn't tremble this time. "Proof," I said. "You've stolen, lied, and watched me suffer for your games." But not anymore. Everyone stared. My mother's eyes filled with tears. This time not of disappointment, but devastation. She turned to Sana, asking if it was true. Silence. Then predictable denial. But I was ready. I showed the receipts, the screenshots, the bank statements. Her lies crumbled one after another like dominoes falling. The chaos that followed didn't satisfy me, it freed me. Sana broke down. Crying, screaming, blaming stress, me, everything but herself. But I didn't feel pity. My parents finally saw the truth. The girl they trusted had been feeding them poison for years. My mother pulled me close, whispering, "I'm so sorry," again and again, as if trying to patch all the old wounds with those 3 words. My father couldn't even look at Sana for days. In time, she left home to start fresh in another city. We barely heard from her for months. Mom fell into silence, but it wasn't the cold silence of before. It was the quiet of realization. She started talking to me again, asking about my life, my dreams, my work. For the first time I felt seen. Years passed. I graduated, started working as a counselor for troubled teens, the kind who've lived through blame and guilt that wasn't theirs. I built my peace slowly. One afternoon I got a call from an unknown number. It was Sana. Her voice sounded small, cracked, full of regret. She said she wished she could undo what she did, that life had punished her enough. I listened. Quietly. I didn't hate her anymore, but I didn't forgive her either. Forgiveness is a gift, and like all gifts, it needs to be earned. When we hung up, I stared at my reflection and realized something deep. Taking the blame for something I never did taught me who I really was. It taught me restraint, patience, and how silence can be the most dangerous truth of all. People will paint your story however they want, but the canvas of justice always dries in your color, not theirs. I learned that not all revenge needs fire. Sometimes justice arrives through clarity, through calm exposure, through the quiet moment when everyone finally sees the truth for what it is. At 13, they made me a scapegoat. At 23, I became the mirror they couldn't look into without guilt. Now, whenever I meet someone who's been wrongly accused, I tell them, don't waste energy proving who you are to people committed to misunderstanding you. Time has a way of collecting debts, and karma always keeps receipts. Hold your silence until your truth speaks for itself. The day it does, those who lied will pray for your forgiveness, and you, finally, will have peace deep enough to sleep soundly. If you felt something in my story, if you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do, like and subscribe to the channel. Remember, truth may be late, but it never loses its voice.